I'm Doug Dahlberg, Director of Digital Transformation Services here at Applied Software. And today we've got one of our great partners represented, Panzera, and we have our good friend, Mr. Glenn Schock, providing us some really cool stuff around the manufacturing industry. So without further ado, Mr. Schock, would you take it away?
Hi, thanks everybody. If it looks like I'm dressed like I'm on vacation, it's because I am. I'm coming to you from lovely Cancun, and I apologize for any internet issues that may or may not transpire during this. However, I'm going to share my screen. And are we good with the presentation? Can you see it okay?
It's coming up. It's on the media player. It's looking good. So yes, we've got it on the media player. It's great, Glenn. Yeah.
Awesome. I absolutely love it when technology works. All right, so I've worked with manufacturing for quite some time in my history in technology. And what I learned about manufacturing specifically is it's all about lowering the unit cost to manufacture, so increasing your margins. Every piece of technology that manufacturing companies tend to care about are ones that improve operational efficiencies, that lower the cost of IT, and enable better collaboration between all the employees and between the manufacturing floor, all the way to the folks doing design, and lowering the time to manufacture. So the solution that we're going to talk about today can actually do all three. It can lower your cost of IT by lowering your cost of data and using cloud to do so. It can improve your operational efficiencies as well as improve overall collaboration. So what are we talking about today? Panzera is a global file system, so you look at it as a NAS. And the reason Panzera exists is because NAS hasn't changed in the last 20 years. If you think of traditional NAS systems, a la your NetApp or EMC Isilon, they are the same now as they were 20 years ago. They serve NFS and CIFS at the edge. They are individual silos. When one runs out of performance, either on the front end, on the filer, or on the back end for the storage, you buy another one, and you buy another one, and you buy another one. And they still act as silos. So if somebody copies the same file from one to the other, you have 2 copies of that file, you have 5 copies of that file, you have 10 copies of that file, depending on how many locations you have. And manufacturing companies that I've historically worked with, between the US and Singapore, Malaysia, they all end up with the exact same file in multiple locations. And it's going to basically cost you money. So that said, what does Panzera do differently? Panzera utilizes the cloud. In utilizing the cloud, it allows you to have all the reliability, all the connectivity of the cloud, but also at a significantly lower price point. And that's the cost, and that's the advantage of working with cloud vendors, is that you can get a ton of storage at a very low cost of entry. So Panzera specifically is the only hybrid multi-cloud data management platform with immediate global consistency. So what does that even mean? So what we are is beyond typical NAS. So we're not a silo. We support on-premise and on-premises and in cloud, and more importantly, in multi-cloud deployments. So if you imagine a NAS system available globally with the same set of files everywhere, maintaining all of that consistency and allowing you to manage one set of data. So that will lower your management costs. So again, Panzera transforms cloud object storage, which can be your traditional Amazon S3, your GCS object store in the back end, Azure Blob, as well as on-premises object stores such as a Cloudian or an IBM Cause, into NAS. And we sit on premises as a software filer in each of your locations, and we back end into that object store. What we do uniquely, and we have 30 plus patents around this, is not corrupt your data. So I've been in the industry a very long time, and I've seen multiple companies try to deploy global file systems. NetApp has done this a couple of times. Quantum had something. IBM currently has IBM Spectrum Scale, which is a private version of GPFS, which is used by the Department of Energy for nuclear testing. And all of those global file systems failed for one reason or another. And the reason why they mostly fail is because they corrupt data. Now, GPFS has been around for a very long time, and nobody cares if it corrupts data because they simply rerun the test. But Panzera is a enterprise quality global file system, which means that we take your data seriously. And around that, a lot of our patents are around global file locking, how we handle the locks. And I'll talk about that in the next few slides. More importantly than making sure that your data is safe, we also give you the local file performance, right? So even though you're using the cloud as your backend data store, on premises, you want performance out of it. So you want it to feel like it's local. And that's exactly what we do. So how do we do it? If you look at these three examples, so let's say that we have a Panzera filer in New York, right? And we have one in London, and then we put a Panzera filer in the cloud. This install is done via Hyper-V or VMDK on your site. So all we need is some kind of hyperconverged or a server. Effectively, we're looking for CPU, some memory, and some local NVMe storage. So when we get that, we deploy the Panzera filer in each of the individual sites, and we connect to the backend object store, wherever it is. Again, it can be on premises, or it can be in the cloud. And this looks like a hub and spoke model, which it mostly is for your data flow. And this is what that data flow looks like. So if I drop a file, let's say I have a 10 meg PowerPoint file, oops, and I lost the screen. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. We'll give you a moment here to get back to it.
Okay. So,
no worries.
Great, because I have to figure out on my Mac how to get to the screen that I was on. So I'm going to hit stop sharing and go here, exit out of that. Share my screen.
It wouldn't be a webinar without a bump.
I know. It's kind of amazing that all these interconnected devices with my iPhone, with my Mac, my phone rings on my on my computer. So in any case, I'm really proud of my 10 meg, and you guys can see my screen again?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I'm really proud of my 10 meg PowerPoint file on my Mac, so I drop it into the global file system. So if this was a project that you were working on, you drop a project off of your local PC and onto the GFS. When that file gets copied, when that copy operation starts over here, and the data is being dropped into the backend object store, they are immediately available in the cloud and in London in this case. So the file system looks the same. Now, if you think about this, every one of your siloed NAS systems out there probably has a lot of the same files in it, right? All of the shares. That no longer happens here, right? So you have one set of data. As the copy operation is done, somebody in New York can double-click on it and open it up for read and write. And if somebody in London tries to open up that file, they will only be able to open it up for read. It'll come up as a read-only PowerPoint file, which makes sense because it's open for read and write in one location, and then it can only be open for read in the other. Otherwise, you're going to corrupt data, which is a problem. Once this file is closed, let's say it's closed off in New York, it can then be open for read and write in London. Not a problem there. But here's what's neat. Let's say that it was open for read and write over on the left-hand side in New York, and then someone tried to open it up for read in London. What happens is that data gets cached in the Panzera filer. So on the back end, we have an internal versioning system. So let's say that it's version 5 of that file that they opened for read. But right before I closed the file, I deleted a slide. So now I'm on version 6. And it was about 8K worth of changes, right? So it's just information that says, I deleted a slide. When it's opened up for read and write in London, there's a conversation between the Panzera filers. So there's not only a hub and spoke network that's built here, there's like a virtual mesh network between all the Panzera filers. It's going to say, hey, over here, can I get this lock for read and for write? And I currently have version 5. What's the current version? It's going to release the lock and say, oh, version 6 is the current version, and here's the 8K that's different. So for those of you that are worried about egress charges from your cloud providers, what's amazing with our technology is that your egress charges are significantly less than you think they're going to be, because the Panzera filers communicate with each other and they actually send deltas over the wire. They extract deltas from the cloud, but they also, if there's a very small amount of changes when someone's requesting a lock, those changes go over that mesh network, which is your private network or your VPNs. So now London can open it up for read and write. Not a problem. Then that file can get closed and life is good. Let's take a different example that isn't a PowerPoint file. Let's say you're working with a file that supports byte level locking. So that's AutoCAD, Revit, Civil 3D, Adobe Premiere. There's a lot of applications out there that support byte level locking or byte range locking, which means you can have a file open in New York, you can have a file open in London, and as long as you're editing different sections of that file, then you can have it both open for read and write. So that's collaboration. Those of you out there in the manufacturing space, you know that that's a lot of value here, right? Not only do you have a NAS system that does traditional NAS, you also have a global file system, which is making your management of files significantly easier, but you also have a system for collaboration, and you don't need to use any third-party clouds or products like a Dropbox or whatever that you're using to collaborate in various parts of the world, because all your data is cached at the edge. We handle any kind of chatty applications at the edge, right? So there are some apps out there that are really chatty between the end user and the NAS system. And if that chattiness hits the cloud or if it hits the overall network, you're going to incur a lot of costs. We manage all that away, right? So you can do byte level locking, and we maintain consistency between both sides with communications between the Panzera filers. We only give out locks for a section of the file, and only one edge device can edit one byte range for that file. Are there any questions coming in about that?
None so far.
Okay, that's awesome. All right, so what else do we do that's unique? I'm sure that all of you out there have heard of ransomware. Ransomware sucks. And if you've been hit with it, you know it's really bad. A lot of our customers have been hit with ransomware, and I'm really proud to say that 0 have paid a ransom. Here's why. The reason none of our customers have ever paid a ransom for any data, and I have to put a little asterisk there, for any data that was on Panzera, because we have had customers that have data that's not on Panzera, and they've paid a ransom for that, but they were able to immediately recover our stuff. So the reason why none of our customers pay ransoms is because the way that we do writes is that our back end is immutable, right? So we can't change it, right? You can't overwrite it. So going back to the example of my 10 meg PowerPoint file, let's say I wrote that file a year ago, and it's gone through a lot of changes. And now it's a 12 meg file. So it started off as a 10 meg file, then I added slides and I deleted slides and I changed graphics and I changed my company logo and blah, 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 blah over the course of the year, and now it's a 12 meg file. If you have VSS, if you have Microsoft, you can right click on that file and you can see through VSS every incarnation of that file, which then you could, if you wanted, take that point in time and make another copy of it. Let's see what this PowerPoint looked like half a year ago. Let's move it over here, right? So we're keeping the original, and now we have another copy of what this PowerPoint looked like a few months ago. More importantly, when ransomware hits, What does it do? It simply encrypts that 12 meg file that existed right before ransomware hit. That is a new 12 meg write for us. So all you have is that original 10 meg file, all the changes, and new 12 megs on top of it. How do we recover from ransomware? We just go to the previous incarnation of that file. That's it. So our customers, when they get hit with ransomware, it's not an if, it is a when, because a lot of them have experienced it. When they get hit with ransomware, what they do is they decide how much of their file system was infected. If it was all of it, let's say it happened on a Friday and they come back on a Monday and everything is completely overwritten, they can go back exactly to the point in time before ransomware hit. If they, let's say they have 100,000 files, but only 1,000 of them were infected before they caught it and shut down the machine that was doing it, they can go to each of those individual files and revert back to the previous version. So what Panzera says is we can recover from ransomware, and this is because our customers have done it, in an hour, in a day, or in a week. And that is entirely up to the customer to decide. Some do forensics, and they try to find out what happened and how, so the recovery times are longer. Has nothing to do with the technology. It has to do with their own auditing. But we have also had customers just say, boop, we're going to go back to the previous version of every file, and let's just move on with our lives, but not pay a ransom. We also don't do backups. The majority of our customers that use cloud as a back end don't back up their systems. Why do you need backups? So you need full and incremental backups to be able to recover to the last point in time if you have data corruption, or if you have a deleted file, or if you have lost files. Well, again, because we're immutable, we don't have any of that. Right? If somebody decides to delete a file, you can go back as an administrator within that file system and look at all the deleted files and basically move them back up. If you want to delete files, let's say that your company has a 7-year retention cycle, then you can use Panzera Data Services, which is our SaaS front end to the entire global file system, which is also available as part of this, and say, look, any file after 7 years, I need you to delete any snapshots and any dependencies on that file, and then get rid of it. So we can ensure that your file system, nothing exists that's over 7 years old or 20 years old or whatever retention cycle you decide, and the system will automate that function. So you can basically just remove everything over a certain age. Of course, everything, if it was accessed 5 minutes ago and it's 7 years old, then it's a 5-minute-old file. It's not a 7-year-old file. So you can decide whatever it is that you want to do. Okay. So our customers don't do backups, and they also don't do remote replication. And the reason they don't do remote replication is because the cloud vendors do it for you. So if you're using Amazon as a backend, or you're using Azure as a backend, or using Google Cloud Storage, all of them do it a little bit differently. But effectively, what they do is they replicate that same file 3 ways within the region. So if you're in, let's say, Google Central Region, they have 3 data centers that are 50 kilometers apart in the Central Region, and that file exists in all 3 of them. So if one data center gets flooded, or whatever happens in Iowa, corn grows through it, I don't know, then the other 2 have it, and you wouldn't even notice that outage because they would flip over to the other object stores. Mm-hmm. And that leads to cost savings, and we'll be talking about that in a moment. So there's a lot of technology that I just talked about. There's the way that we do our consistency between the mesh network, between all the Panzera filers. There's what we do for being immutable. And I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So are there any questions at all?
I believe we've got one, yes.
Okay.
Do you have specific examples to share from customers that avoid paying ransomware if they get hit with an attack?
Good question. I am going to say keep on the lookout for our website. So most customers that get hit with ransomware aren't exactly making it public. We are finalizing. By finalizing, I mean it's already done and is going through legal on both sides to make sure that this customer is not leaving themselves open to any lawsuits. But
Right.
we actually have one customer that is going public with their experience on ransomware. And what's beautiful about that story, when we do publish it on our website, is that they have 3 sets of data. They have the good stuff that they put on Panzera. They have the stuff they didn't really care about but wanted to keep that they put on something else. And then they had the structured data, which was in a database. They got hit with ransomware over Thanksgiving this last year. And I believe that this is still true, but I'm going to say it like it is. This part I know is true. They recovered all the stuff that was on Panzera in under a week because they got hit with a lot, and it got hit pretty hard because it was over Thanksgiving, which allowed the ransomware to kind of do its thing while no one was in the office and no one was looking at it. And it encrypted the majority of the Panzera file system, but not everything, and they were unwilling to lose data. So they recovered slowly, more slowly than our file system could actually recover had they wanted to just, go back to another point in time. The other data and the structured, and I know this is true as of, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago, they still hadn't recovered. And the reason why they hadn't recovered it, they actually paid the ransom for that set of data. They kind of negotiated them down, I'm guessing, because the Panzera stuff was clean. And they got a decryptor, but it didn't actually work really well. And they got the source code for it, and they sent it to a third-party software developer to help them fix it so that it could actually decrypt, because they had the decryption key. So now they just have to decrypt everything in the structured data set, and they also had to do everything outside of Panzera. Their response is, we should have it would have been cheaper had we put just everything on the Panzera, because we could have recovered, everything. And then they actually should have done a little bit better on the structured data side. I had 10 years at Oracle. You can recover an Oracle database from that kind of corruption if you know how to do it. You'd definitely lose a lot of data, but you can recover at least, and they would be up. But this is a company that the majority of their important stuff they kept on Panzera, so they were able to move forward. And there's a lot of cases where the companies just don't come back from it. And it's something that I'll talk about on the next slide, in a slide coming up, I believe. So we will have one to answer your question directly. We don't have something online now, but we do have a customer that is willing to do that. They have done it, and we'll be posting it very, very soon. But it's not a stretch to think that, more than half of our customers have been hit with ransomware, and that's pretty true. Something, and this is going a little bit off topic, but Panzera Data Services, we are going to integrate with another company. We're actually not going to. We're doing that right now with a company called Bullwall, Bullwall. And although we can recover very quickly from ransomware, you have to know which files were affected because we're just a file system, right? We're going to make the changes that are going to be made. Bullwall actually is, and this is going into the concept of user data management, which is the market that we are in, right? Quite frankly, we're going towards that market. We currently do things that are around user data management, not just NAS and GFS. But it would be a lot better for our customers if they got a list of files that were impacted. And what Bullwall does is a couple of things. One, it will send to Panzera Data Services the list of files that were impacted before Bullwall kicked the device off the network. And that's what that system does that we're going to integrate, is not only will Panzera Data Services track the files, but if you have a Cisco network or certain types of network that are standardized that allow remote cancellation of a port, it will shut off the port that the device is attached to, or it will shut off the Wi-Fi access that the device is attached to that's causing all of the corruption. And here's a public service announcement. The demo that they gave me was phenomenal. This was a while ago. Don't pick up stray iPhone cables. So if you see a quote-unquote free iPhone cable at a Starbucks, it's not free. They showed me an example of a cable they literally picked up, and the USB side of it had a chip in it that as soon as you attach it to your computer and attach it to your iPhone and infects your computer with ransomware, but it does not encrypt your laptop. It waits until your laptop joins a corporate network and infects that. And if you think about how that works, as soon as a laptop makes it through the VPN and onto a corporate network, it is behind all of the security meant to keep that stuff out. Yep.
Yes.
It's behind it, and it's encrypting. Yep.
That sounds like a variant of the juice jacking exploit. That's some very scary stuff. It's
brilliant. And their system shows you how quickly everything gets infected and all that. But more importantly, it will send a list of Panzera data services, at which point we can automate the recovery of all the files that were affected. And usually it's under a minute worth of files, which is kind of nice. And then it boots that machine, and it leaves the administrator to do whatever the administrator is going to do to quarantine it and fix it. So
you're not booting the filer offline, you're booting the client causing the damage offline.
Correct.
Oh, that is brilliant, Glenn. That is brilliant. I look forward to seeing more on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And me too. Our engineering team is currently doing the integration of that. And I found it very important for us to do that as an alliances person as well as a former engineer. So this is a more technical version of the same slide. This is how you would deploy Panzera Filer. So if you have on-premises locations that use NFS v3, v4, SMB, which is CIFS, also you can deploy this in the cloud. That's another piece of what's interesting, is if you have a global file system, you can now also deploy Panzera into any and all of the clouds and allow cloud native access to that data set. What does that allow you to do? It allows you to run computer vision and AI, ML, and analytics against your unstructured data set without having to copy the data into the cloud, right? The data is already there. And even though it's not an object form, it is in file form, cloud native services can attach via NFS and then extract the data and then put them into an analytics engine, such as BigQuery for Google, or Watson from IBM, or whatever you want to use, and then do whatever analytics you want to do in your data set. I call it basically unleashing your data, right? As soon as you put a Panzera Filer in the cloud, it has immediate access to everything you want it to have access to, and you can start using cloud native apps without doing any copy operations. You can just convert the data into whatever format you want, insert it into a NoSQL database, and run your analytics, and then push it back out to everybody else for immediate access. I have quite a lot of my healthcare customers looking at that right now. I am sure that there are a lot of manufacturing workflows, right, for improvement, for optimization, that it wouldn't hurt if you could have some computer vision, look at your documentation, and then run some analytics and then push that out.
Oh, quality control, insurance, that kind of stuff, reviewing, video inspection. Oh, the list is endless. You're absolutely right there.
Exactly. Okay. So this is what I talked about for data resilience without replication. This is the ransomware example. As I said, that every time you make a file, everything is completely additive. When ransomware happens, it re-encrypts that same file, and we just go back to the previous point in time. It's really straightforward. Okay. What else is interesting? We don't care how many sites you have. Now think about that. Since Panzera charges based on backend capacity, the amount of sites you have is entirely irrelevant to us. Think about that from a cost standpoint. If you want to bring up a new facility and give that facility access to NAS resources, what do? You buy another NAS machine, you plop it in that facility, you connect it to your network, and it costs you whatever that amount of capacity for that NAS cost. With Panzera, let's say that you have a petabyte of backend storage, and you want to add a 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th facility. All you do is put a Panzera filer at that location, and it costs you absolutely nothing, minus the cost of the CPU, memory, and local storage that you need to run a Panzera as an edge cache, right? So maybe it costs you $1,500, and that's about it. So the way that you scale, right, is very 2000s versus very 1990s. And so you can scale additional locations without incurring any cost, because as it says, There's one authoritative data set on the back end, and there's one policy, there's one way to run your network, and all of this equates to lower cost of management, lower cost of IT, and hopefully increasing your margins. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty, costs. The way that I like to position this is step by step, because on the left-hand side, it's a very bold statement, which says that it's as little as 1/3 the total cost of ownership of traditional NAS. A lot of people read that and they'll go like, that's BS. There's no way that can be true. But take it step by step, that if you buy 1 terabyte of traditional NAS, right, if you need to back it up and if you need to replicate it, you're buying at least 3 terabytes of additional storage to do that. And that is quite honestly conservative. My company got on one of our calls and had to slide up with an air carrier, right? Like one of the folks that do airplanes. And they're like, well, for every terabyte we buy, we need an additional 6, right? So they're overdoing it, right? Because they're replicating the 2 different sites and they're backing all that up and then they're offsiting it and all this kind of stuff. So most companies, when they buy 1 terabyte, they're going to buy an additional terabyte to do remote replication, and they're going to buy 2 additional terabytes to do backups. Now, the cost of all that isn't necessarily going to be the same as the cost of the original terabyte, because for a remote replicated system, it could be, for my math and my TCO math, it's usually 3/4 the cost of the original system, right? Because you don't need to buy the same kind of drives. You don't need to give it the same kind of software. And then for backups, it is going to be about half the cost, right? But you have to buy 2. So there you go. Which is why we end up at 1/3 and not 1/4 the cost, by the way, because 1 and 4. But with Panzera, it is 1 terabyte of stored data is 1 terabyte purchased, right? So if you're using cloud on the back end, you don't need to do replication. They replicate for you. If you're thinking to yourself, well, what if the entire region goes down? You can do cross-region replication. So there are cases in AWS and in Google where you can have it stored twice in one region and 1 additional time in a second region further away. Panzera also supports the concept of cloud mirroring. So if you wanted to, our system could replicate to AWS as well as to Azure. And you can choose which one you want to be your primary and which one you want to be your backup. And that way, if a whole failure happens for an entire cloud, then all of the Panzera filers will say, okay, now this other cloud is our primary data source. It's called right splitting. We actually don't charge anything for it. So we don't charge you additional capacity costs to do that. It is a free feature. But you are going to pay the 2 cents per gig per month to your cloud provider for storage, which is a lot less than you'd be paying for a traditional NAS system. So also, ease of management, right? So within that 1/3, I actually don't put in the TCO, the lower the cost of management, the fact that you don't have to worry about backups, you don't have to worry about recovery. All of that is in the system. Like I mentioned, everything is immutable on the back end. And if it's immutable, that means you don't need to back it up. You can recover to any point in time, at any time, up to your retention period. Any questions? Does anybody want to call BS on me on this?
Doesn't look like we've got any yet. I think one of the things that's really powerful about the Panzera platform is that data deduplication portion. As you were talking about adding sites, it really doesn't matter how many you add. Somebody might say, hey, well, if I'm bringing all this extra data from another site, data deduplication, if that's copies of or versions of, something that already exists in another site, how does that data deduplication really impact them then?
Pretty substantially. So let's say that you're aggregating and you're moving from 5 filers at 5 different sites to Panzera, and we've done this multiple times. Effectively, what will happen is we'll see somewhere around 30 to 50% less data come to Panzera than the customer thought. So let's say that all 5 of these sites each had 100 terabytes, which means that there's 500 terabytes of data. And the customer looks at us and goes, okay, we want to buy 500 terabytes of Panzera. And they tell us that this is like they're aggregating 5 sites. We say, you probably want to buy 300 terabytes because you have that much redundant data out there. So we're doing, and you're probably thinking like, look, my NAS system, whatever I have on premises, does dedupe. Yes, it does. But if you drop a PowerPoint file in one and another and another and another, now you have the same PowerPoint file in 4 locations. While they are locally deduped, if somebody makes another copy and another copy and another copy locally, that's deduplication. But it is not cross-site. If you have 5 copies of the same file in 5 locations, when you migrate to Panzera, you only have 1 copy of that file. And like you mentioned, we do deduplication, we do compression, and then we do encryption in that order. So we do dedupe and compress and encrypt, or FIPS 140-2. We have all the military-grade encryption. We do AES 256 on the wire, the whole 9 yards. So we're super encrypted as well. What we see when customers aggregate, we have had, and my marketing folks like to use this as an example, 70% less data. We do have those examples of customers that come on and they end up with like 30% of the data they had before. But I'm more conservative. I'd say, like, realistically, depending on how many sites you have, you'll see like 30 to 50% less, unless all of your data is unique in all locations. So your mileage will vary.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. We've seen a lot of examples of, high-speed video, CAD files, the majority of unstructured data be significantly impacted by that global, as you said, global dedupe store. So, not everything grows, just so out of control. You really do prevent that I'm going to be honest, NAS sprawl, right? As you mentioned, you don't need to keep adding units, in a site when it fills up, because you're not filling the site up. You're just adding to the cloud, which is, pretty much limitless, right? Limited by your pocketbook, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it's at a low cost, right? Again, the great thing about cloud storage is at list price, it's 2 cents per gig per month. It's very inexpensive, and that's at the highest tier. And then they usually have 4 tiers of storage, which all effectively use the same technology, but it's just retention period stuff. And you can split us up on a file system by file system basis. You can go to different object stores, which means different tiers. And you can do hierarchical storage management effectively. So you can tier your data as well. So you end up paying a lower price to the cloud provider. So there's lots of neat stuff that you can do here. But yeah, this technology, it's what brought me to the company, is the resilience that's within the global file system, the fact that it does not corrupt data in any way, shape, or form. They handle the locking really, really well. I didn't really talk too much about the HA functionality. I didn't want to geek out too much, but we have 2 levels of HA. There is HA that you can do on premises. So basically, you just put a second filer there. There's also a global HA that you can put anywhere, and that's for lock management, so that if the entire region goes down, the global HA will pick up the locks from the downed region so that the other regions can get a lock on that file, right? And do what needs to happen, but again, without creating versions, without creating corruption. So the technology here, while it is heavily distributed and highly performant, ensures data consistency. And those have been historically difficult to do, which is why I was personally impressed with Panzera's technology.
It's, one of the things, we've been doing it for over 6 years now. And every time we turn around, there's another new feature. There's another, you keep taking it to another level. My favorite was the ability you guys put when you started putting the virtual machines in the cloud, because now we can actually act upon our data without relocating it, retraining, reprogramming, and then the cost savings there are just astronomical. That is probably my favorite feature that's been in the Panzera platform in the last 3 years, at least. My favorite, hands down.
And I like talking about workflows, right? And that's all about industry knowledge. And there are a lot of workflows in manufacturing that are not only collaboration, which is, and this can help you with that, with the byte level locking functionality. It allows the folks that are doing the design work, kind of pre-manufacturing, to collaborate across the globe on the same file. No one's overriding each other, and you're working well together. But also, right, the data set's all there, right? And you can put that data and make it accessible by the cloud, right? And figure out a workflow that utilizes the tools that the cloud gives you, right? Such as ML, AI, computer vision, all the stuff that's out there that's able to ingest your data set and improve your processes, right? Improve your manufacturing line, improve your automation, and figure it out. And the great thing about that is you know what that workflow is out there, right? You know how it's like you're thinking, oh, if only I can get my plethora of data into BigQuery, then I can do something with it. But it's expensive because the copy operations are expensive, and then leaving it there is expensive. And then am I exposing my private data? Can I obfuscate it? And you can create workers in the cloud that can take away private information and just put in the information that's relevant into BigQuery and then run analytics on that. So you know what your workflows are. Bring them to us. Like maybe we can improve them and work with our partners. We are very close. You know, both of us, ASTI as well as Panzera, are very close with the cloud providers, and we can bring them to you. And there's always money in there to help you guys figure that stuff out.
Yeah, that is a very true statement. They love to help solve puzzles. They really do. We do have another question down here. How much user training is involved in transitioning to a Panzera platform?
Good question. So we have a class that we do that's about 3 days long that allows for you to be trained not only on how to use it, but actually how to install it as well, administer the platform, add additional Panzera filers, scope the VM sizes. It gets pretty technical. There's a 3-day version. I believe there's a 1-day version as well for simple administration tasks, but it's not a lot. I've been through the simplified 1-day version of it, just the front-end management. If you know NAS, you know this. It's actually considerably simpler. All you have to do is kind of get used to our interface. But if you're, making NFS connections, CIFS connections, doing shares, that kind of stuff, it's really, really straightforward. We try to make it as usable as a front end as possible.
It's very.
It's not a bunch of. It's not a bunch of command line. Yeah, it's not a bunch of command line.
No, I'll agree. It's very elegant, and for the administration side, it is elegant. I like the training, the programs. Originally those weren't overly available, but as far as the end user, there isn't any. I think that's the beauty of it. We slip in for the end user; they don't know anything, and you guys do a world-class job educating the administrators using it. So it's end users. Not a thing.
Oh, yeah. End users don't have to do anything. Yeah, end users, it looks like a traditional NAS. It's a CIFS connection. They can, if you support VSS, you can do all the whole right-clicking thing and go to any version of the file and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it looks the same as a Windows server, to be quite honest.
So to training on the end users, it's non-existent. And then the world-class training you provide the administrators. We all love equipping the clients to make them educated. I mean, educated client, I think somebody used to use that as their favorite type of client. So tagline, I won't say any more copyright infringement there. So what do you got up here? What's with the world-class support here? Tell us a little bit more. I know this.
So
brag away.
Yes, we're very proud of this. So there's a concept called a Net Promoter Score. And these are examples of existing Net Promoter Scores out there. If you've ever answered a question, when a company asks you on a survey on a rate 1 to 10, would you refer this company to your friends? You're helping somebody figure out what their Net Promoter Score is, from a 10 all the way down to a 0. So you can do lowest possible score of -100, highest possible score of 100. Apple is very well loved. Everybody would recommend Apple to their friends except me, who if your iPhone gets a call in the middle of a webinar, it affects your Mac somehow. So I'm joking. In any case,
it's more of an end user training thing.
I should have shut that off, right? So the Panzera, our support, we do take it very seriously, and it is a 24/7, 365, follow the sun type of support. But more importantly, our support is really a bunch of bulldogs. We want to solve the problem. We want to solve it as quickly as possible. and we want to do it as well as possible. So when our company changed a little bit of leadership, and that leadership change top down was Panzera should be a company that is easy to work with, right? From not only the sales aspect, but all the way through support. And we love the fact that it's showing up in our NPS score, and we're currently at an 87, which is, and I love flying Southwest, which is above that of Southwest Airlines, other tech companies, and around that of Apple. So that's really impressive.
No, that's absolutely impressive. I 100% agree. That is awesome.
Yep.
It makes my job a little easier.
Yes. We do have examples in manufacturing. We have manufacturing customers. Again, there's two sets of workflow that I look at for manufacturing. There is the collaboration workflow, which we help with. That is, the traditional, like opening files up, prefab, and, working together to figure out the design and doing all that kind of stuff. But then there's another workflow, which is what can happen if your data set is unleashed to the cloud, right? And it's obfuscated and you can run analytics on it. What can you do to improve your business processes if all that information was available for AI and ML and computer vision and all the things? And I would love for you to bring those workflows to me. Again, I've worked with manufacturing for a long time, but I think that there's really ingenious things that we can do together once you have that kind of native access. We do have a case study with Milwaukee Tools, and this is around collaboration and the cost reduced. Again, every time we save money, your margin goes up. You know that. And hopefully from, and you guys can read this as well as I can, so I'm not going to read it to you. But hopefully from this presentation, you've seen how we can not only save you money on the collaboration side of it, which is what we did for Milwaukee, but we can also save you money on the IT side. Right? We can lower your IT costs by getting rid of backups, by getting rid of remote replication, but you're still offsited. You're still in compliance, right? Because that data is offsite. And overall, reducing the amount of storage that you buy because you don't need as much as you think you need.
Hardware costs are reduced because you don't have to keep buying boxes as your data grows. That paradigm shift.
That is a good point. Yeah. If you've ever gone through your 3 and 5 year cycle of a NAS refresh because it came off of lease or it's off of warranty and it's more expensive to re-up the warranty for extended than it is to buy a new product, we're talking about evergreen technology here. You never have to do another NAS migration again, right? Because when we release new code in the Panzera filer, we give you new code in the Panzera filer, you just upgrade it. And then all of the cloud providers in the back end are upgrading their storage without you seeing it. So you no longer have to go through those machinations of, okay, I have an old NetApp that's sitting here that's 5 years old. It's coming off warranty after 5 years. 4.5 years, I got to buy another one. I got to put it in the data center next to the existing one. I got to copy it all over, and then I got to get rid of the old one. That's annoying. And I've been in the storage industry, again, 20 plus years. I've worked for all the storage vendors. And that's just a part of life. Now it doesn't really have to be. So that evergreen technology thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the forklifts are gone. I think, really just kind of briefly, you mentioned in the very beginning about this is a virtual machine. You touched Hyper-V and VMware. I think that just right there, as far as those technologies moving to the new hardware as you dictate, as the client dictates, as leases expire, warranties expire, that doesn't really, how difficult is it to move a virtual machine these days? Not very.
Not difficult at all. And
no, it's
you
not.
don't have to take downtime. You don't think, and you're not actually moving data, right? That's the key. You're not doing a data migration, which you'd have to do from one NetApp to another, for example. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great, I'm glad you pointed that out. Thank you.
No, thank you. So these are other examples of manufacturing companies that we work with. These are existing customers of ours. Panzera has been in business for a very long time. We have quite an install base, and it's growing. Right, so we're growing very rapidly as a company.